really, Kevin, I just want to say thanks for being here. Right. Okay. Yeah, really. Thanks for taking the time out to, come on board. I gave you a bit of a briefing to sort of say that I've set up this sort of conversation today around a hashtag called Table Talk, really. So this table talk for me really is about either this literal table talk that we're both sitting at our desks, which is a form of table where we're having a chat. Otherwise, it could be also around a table, maybe, over food and such like. And I'm just going to keep it very loose and everything. But just to sort of give you a bit of background, I set up libertylane.tv at YouTube several years ago with the intention of inviting people to come and be part of a conversation, sort of conversation part interview. So I could feel that I could share with the world or share with the community or the tribe the kind of people that I know, as well as what impresses me or what inspires me about other people. And amazingly, totally out of the blue, on April the 7th, I was in LinkedIn that day and saw, a post by you, okay? And the other thing also that linked me to you, which I'll, just for the background, obviously that we've met before many years ago, haven't we?
Yep. Yeah, of course.
Okay, which I'll get you to actually share that as well. But I understand now that you are a Life Navigator coach, so you help people also navigate, their path. And you can, by all means, I want you to share that as well. But what moved me to invite you today was the combination of you life navigating and doing that for yourself, and I'm sure around the food element. And in fact, your post was really to do with food. And there are certain highlighted bits, but before I jump into that, maybe you can just tell me about your journey, about how you went from, your story really, because I know you've also got a background in design, right? Actually, not too dissimilar to me.
Okay.
Yes. I've got a design background. I've got an interior design background. So it's interesting, isn't it? This sort of element of creation and problem solving maybe, and, sort of expression. They're all the key elements, I find. Anyway, so I'm just going to sort of, put it to you so you can just tell me more about, yourself to me, as well as, whoever's listening.
Great. Thank you. Well, thank you, Rafa. Firstly, thank you for having me on board and for getting in contact and inviting me to be part of the conversation, which is great. As you mentioned, we met in the kitchen, didn't we? So we met in the field of transformation, but very much in training around what it is to learn how to cook or to develop cooking skills, but as part of a exploration of consciousness. So obviously we've both worked under similar teachers or some of the same teachers and spent a lot of time, scrubbing dishes and chopping vegetables and all sorts of things like that. But very much in the realm of that activity being so connected to who we are and connecting to something beyond ourselves, obviously connecting to what that provides as an activity, but also developing awareness and sensitivity and also being of service. So, I mean, I think we'll come back to that a little bit more. As you said, it's also, that's been one string to my bow. It's been a passion of mine, and it's been a formative part of my own self-exploration is to connect with that passion I have around food, which has always been alongside everything else I do, but it was always a bit of a question. It's like I was very passionate around food, transformation, working in design, very interested in connecting with people but following a certain path, opening up a certain path for myself. And obviously I've come to a point where the coaching has become my main focus, but it's almost like the wheels spinning around. For a long time, design was the thing I did, and the food and the self-development and the transformation were the things I included as part of that. But what really struck me about engaging with cooking and food is there's a very pure form of creativity in that. And it's a creativity which is beyond what can often be quite a sort of, it's all about me experience, and especially with design. And it's often it's a clash. It can become a clash of different views. Whereas cooking is something which can really liberate and really can be pure collaboration. You can have a certain vision, but it's then working with other people to realize something which is beyond what you can conceive of. and then it's not really about you at all. It's a very humbling form of creativity. And of course, it's very empowering as well. You can develop your skills and confidence. And I mean, I feel very at home and at ease in the kitchen. And that's come from years and years of training and experience and exploration. But throughout it all, it's all about sort of taking on things which I'm, beyond what I think I'm capable of doing. And then it's sort of expanding my own capacity.
I'm just wondering if I can sort of intervene here, because one thing that keeps on coming up is, where did your food inspiration or your food, because also in your passage, already it says it connects us with our culture, our heritage, and our humanity, right? So I'm just wondering, in your childhood, for example, what did it feature quite a bit?
Yes, it did. Yeah, I think.
Is that why your inspiration of food? I mean, how did food fit for you in as you were, in your life?
Well, if I go right back,
professionally, if you like, yeah.
Yeah.
For example, in my life, food was a big thing in my culture, being an Arab and Syrian. Food was very much around the table. We helped mum in the kitchen. It was kind of part of our rote development as a child. We were in the kitchen since we were 4 or 5 years old. As soon as we were tall enough to do the counter, and even then, we were on stools, to do the kitchen stuff. So just tell me a bit about how your food featured, and how it grew.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's a similar story. It sort of started from family, obviously. And I grew up in New Zealand and very much identify with the New Zealand culture. So there's very much a culture of, barbecue culture, summer eating, very much like, group cooking outside, putting things together and all sort of grazing from it, but from very early on, my mother was a very good cook and very organized as a cook. But she was also working part-time. So I remember from very early age that we would be helping out doing preparation for the meal, but we'd also be making our own lunches. I remember sort of being 7 or 8 years old and, making our own school boxes, school lunches to take. And I remember the excitement of that, of like making little skewers of ham and cheese and, just being a bit creative with that. Yeah. And so it never occurred as a chore. It was always something that was sort of part of our responsibility, but it was also very, very creative right from the start. And I think that, I guess I really connected. There is something about doing the outdoor stuff, but also things like fishing. And, I loved fishing when I was young. I would go fishing with my dad, but I also would fish where we were growing up. So I would catch eels and I would cook eels on a little homemade outdoor stove, or bake potatoes in a fire, just very, as I was growing, and this is again from very young, 8, 9, 10, I would spend the weekends doing sort of hunting and fishing and then cooking food and having little pretend stuff. So I'm very connected to that, like, as an experience. So that's probably the origin of it. And I think that obviously being in New Zealand as well, there's a very strong Maori culture, I was fascinated by that whole thing of collective, cooking, preparing feasts, doing the hangi, which is cooking the food in the earth with fire and steaming it. So everyone takes part in the whole thing. The men are often off doing the fire, and and the women are sort of cutting the veg and putting and everyone comes together as a division of labor. But
no, totally. And that reminds me as well that similarly, we would go to the mountains, and the men would get the spit going and would have our lamb or sheep, and the men would just get this enormous barbecue going, and all the women would come out with the cars with sort of prepared salads or hummus, and bread, and this massive feast and a convoy of cars going up to the mountains, on a Sunday. We were really kids, and we'll be brambling around playing, and we would help out and stuff. But it really, reminds me of those moments, and I feel so. There are treasures, aren't they? Because even to this day, I remember them, and it touches my heart. And I think we've been very fortunate to have that as part of our lives.
Yeah,
because it's kind of instilled some kind of foundation, really. I don't know whether it's around food or family, culture, our tribe, because even the fact that we live in a city now, that things are different. And I just wonder, there's an element of, at the time I was in Japan, but, maybe the kids in the city don't get to do that. But do you think that those kind of elements that people can still introduce despite the fact that they're not on a particular,
Yeah,
because food has come such a long. One of the issues that we have with food, it's so far away from its origins, isn't it? I mean, if we look at fast food, or
Yeah.
all that kind of food. I mean, see, I mean, your face just says it all, really.
Well, I'm sort of intrigued. This is a really interesting time as well, having gone through this isolation. And I think I shared this with you before when we talked prior to this talk around, I spent some time back in New Zealand over Christmas. And when we came back, we sort of looked at the way we'd been living and eating as a family and realized that, hold on, we're not creating our experience around eating in the way that we should. So we got a round table, and we started having dinner together instead of being perched on a sort of breakfast bar or grabbing, doing the kids and then doing us. And so we actually came back to the core activity around a practice around eating, making sure we all stop, we all eat together. We sort of cut away distractions.
Well,
And that had a huge...
What did you find that brought up? Or, I mean, clearly, was there an improvement? Did you find that the whole relationship around the family was, much more, sort of, I mean, could you tell the difference between before and now, in terms of,
massively. I mean, obviously I've got 2 young kids, and I've got, my son's 18 months, my daughter's 6. And simply by doing that, we're all eating together, I can see the difference in my son particularly. But it was also something we could reaffirm a relationship with food and with eating with our daughter, and also, connect together. How was, talk about that time where you connect as a family and talk about how was your day and what happened, and, sit still, realize
table manners, right?
Yeah, table manners.
Table manners really need to be instilled. I mean, as a waitress, you get to see a lot of families, particularly some of the restaurants I work were family orientated. And I was sometimes really appalled at how the lack of discipline some children had around the table, or how much spoiltness, or how much too much choice they were given as well, that really reflected their behavior. And then also kind of the whole idea about sharing food, was almost as if it was quite a rare thing, and some of them didn't really know how to behave. I mean, I think you're always going to get children who misbehave, because I think, think about it, I was always a bit naughty when we went out as well, but I think there is that, isn't there, the whole kind of, and it's interesting because, I mean, I don't have a personal family myself, to share food around the table, but I love having people around. I love being a good host, or, or when I've had people around, people say, oh my God, you're a really amazing host, Rafa, and blah, blah, because I just love it. I just, it's rubbed off from my mother, the sharing of food, or, and I'm very blessed that I have a skill, or it's not a learned skill, but it was a learned skill from mom. But it's a sharing of the joys of food for me, and I'm just really lucky that I can cook it well, or cook well, should I say, I mean, there are different levels of cooking and chefing and whatever. Personally, I'm all about the home, right? The hearth, that kind of element. I think it's great when you get chefs out in the kitchen who come from that place of delivery, so this is really why I wanted to talk about it with you, because I know that you're a family man. You mentioned certain things to do with, the importance of how, the love for food and cooking was very important, especially around with the family. I mean, another one of your posts as well, you talked about here, very, that there is a sort of, especially currently with what we're going through, is about beating the bug, headline, while you were very compassionate towards people during the lockdown at home, you felt that it was really important that you were able to stock up on certain provisions. Do you recall that one? And I think food plays a part. You tell me about that. The food plays a part within our sense of emotional stability. Sure, and how we engage with that. Not only as a tribe, but what we feed ourselves.
Yeah, well, it comes back to our core needs, really, doesn't it? It's almost that Maslow's hierarchy. We need food, shelter, and security. That's the sort of basic fundamentals. So when this thing first broke, I was really intrigued by this whole thing about people getting toilet paper. I didn't get that particularly. It's like, first thing I thought is I've got to bulk buy some grains. I've got to make sure that if things really hit the fan, that I can provide food for my family. And that it's like, why are people buying toilet paper?
I'll tell you, I'll give you some clarity around the toilet paper, which I think also, I think somewhere I read, but it makes such sense. It's to do with the root chakra, which is to do our seat. So because suddenly you know, all of it, you know, the whole security, sense
Sure.
of security in one's foundation had been slapped, or, you know, like a tsunami of shock, that
Yeah.
buying toilet paper in bulk was a way of people handling what they were unable to stabilize,
Yeah. Yeah.
interestingly.
Yeah.
And it's to do with, of course, this is where we also kind of release, right? You know, sort of, you know,
Mm.
sort of one for a bit, you know, sort of defecate and stuff. But it's a form of interesting security. And it makes
Yes.
such total sense. But I, like you, actually went straight away to check out what I could buy that would also last me,
Mm.
you know, like the pulses and things, and I could improvise and cook and stuff. So, and that maybe came with the fact that I know how to cook and use these things. I mean,
Yes.
the fact that when I did go to the supermarket, my experience of it was, I was really shocked. I just got back from Canada. So I knew that not the lockdown hadn't quite kicked in, but it was just
Mm.
on the springboard of propelling forward. But there was
Mm.
already a panic. So when I got to my local Sainsbury's, I was really shocked to see that the shelves were really quite empty. And I
Mm.
didn't know what had happened. I didn't know what had happened, right?
Wow.
So I just thought, oh, maybe the delivery couldn't come through. I was just really confused because I've kind of missed the
Mm.
kind of the moment, I guess. So, you know, I was more thinking, okay, and there was some pasta left, but I don't normally do pasta, so that was my immediate go-to.
Mm. Yeah.
You know, but it was just interesting, isn't it? You know, but this whole toilet paper, as you say, people are proudly walking down the street
Yeah.
with a 9-pack.
Well, I tell you what I was very grateful for as well is that I think this has been a conscious decision over a few years. We're very fortunate where we live and that we're well provided with independent outlets which sell food, and, you know, probably sort of natural and organics, or at least sort of healthily focused. And they're a family run business, independent business.
Yeah,
Clearly they know what they're doing. They've got their shit together.
yeah, yeah,
And I was just thinking about that, is that I haven't shopped in the supermarket for years. You know, we've got a great, we're so lucky we're in Stoke Newington, so we have an organic weekly market. So most of the time we go to organic weekly market and we go to this independent natural food store. So
so your
immediately,
market's still running for you as well now,
it's weirdly, I haven't been going, but
oh,
I know the owner because I used to run a store
right?
there. And so I ran into her, or didn't, not too close.
Yes,
But
yes,
they are still running it, and apparently it's regulated, but
yeah,
you know, it's probably one of the safest places to shop. But
yeah. I know the Barnes one locally here is running, but also the Chiswick one they have at the farmers market, which is a bit of a shame.
yeah,
But
yeah,
that particular market was actually running on the first weekend. And I remember then thinking, well, this is actually not very well regulated because people are way too close to each other. You know,
yeah,
anyone was kind of looking at the meat before it kind of seemed to sort of be going off, you know, whatever, you know, off the radar. And
yes,
I believe that some of them were running it quite organized, that you were able to phone up, you know, and then pick it up somehow. There was going to be a pickup point or something like that.
yeah,
But yeah, no, it is interesting actually, you know,
yeah,
but especially as we live in a time now, particularly in the West, where food is so readily available, isn't it? You know,
yeah,
you have so much of it. You know, the other thing that I got upset about was the wastage. I believe there was a lot of people who'd bought too much, probably didn't
mm,
have the ability to know how to really batch cook or prepare it or whatever, and so a lot had gone to waste. You know,
yes, yes, yes,
you know, and I think some way the education of food, or I know like Jamie Oliver did a lot to educate food in schools and all that kind of stuff. But I think there's something that we can bring him back to kind of learning to cook from home, you know, or
yeah.
the importance of sharing that. Because in fact, that was another thing you felt like it was really important to, you know, cooking together at home,
Mm. Well,
you
there's a
know.
couple of things I'd like to pick up on that with it, because I've been really intrigued by this whole increase of convenience and the way it has actually, not just at home cooking level, but the whole introduction of Deliveroo and Uber Eats, and it's actually undermined a lot of the local businesses, a lot of the restaurants, a lot of them have folded before this even hit.
Yes.
But it also, it's this whole thing of expanding choice, isn't it? So you get to the point now where it's like, well, we're gonna have a takeaway meal, which you're not even eating the same food. So, you know, mum and dad will have this and the kids will have
Yes.
this.
Yes.
And so what happens is we're going further and further apart and becoming more isolated.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
we're not actually getting the value of, okay, what happens when you share a meal and the same meal? And then you can go back again to that thing of, okay, what happens when you actually cook together? Because it's a different experience. If you're eating the same food, you become more aligned. You know, it's just, and then if you come, I've had some interesting experiences the last few weeks where obviously you're not going to be engaged or have the energy to cook and eat together every night. But there's been a couple of times where my wife and I have met in the kitchen and go, God, we're both so exhausted. Why don't we try and create something together? And we've created the most beautiful meals out of just our what resources we had. we managed to come up with a really beautiful composed dish.
Yeah.
And it's really taken us both by surprise. It's like, wow. And I was like, I can only cope with chopping right now. And she's like, oh, that's okay. Well, I'll put this together. And then suddenly we sort of fire off each other, and suddenly we have a fully balanced meal.
Lovely, yeah.
With grains, with vegetables, with a pickle, with a fresh salad, a protein, as you know, the way you try, you have at least an awareness of composing a balanced meal from sort of whole food or macrobiotic principles. But to actually combine resources and then, have something which is beyond what you even think you're capable of, when the easy out would be, oh, let's just deliver it,
Oh. And they're really busy. I mean, they're more delivery guys here locally in Chiswick, London, in the West London. I've never seen them as many of them available. And some of them, of course, in my view as well, are way too close to, they're not even 2 meters apart. So I've got another beef about that. Somehow they seem to be immune to this thing, or unaware that this is why we're where we are, somehow. But anyway, we'll just park that, or just leave it in the morning and come back to it. But it's true. And one thing that came to me when you shared that, and I'm sure there's another point you want to bring in, but I've been doing these vlogs about how to manage, kind of not to manage, but sort of to be empowered during this whole sort of place of life, and without also omitting the fact that there are emotional turbulence that could be coming up and all this kind of stuff. But one word that I had used a few times, particularly concerned for the people who are in a dynamic, maybe at home, not particularly getting on or whatever, was a unified whole. Now we can call the unified whole in terms of family structure, and relating in a partnership, marriage, relationship. And for me, what you shared there was a real unification, of your abilities, your skills in that moment, your levels, and there was like an alchemy that happened, and but you felt really close, or just this, as I said, you were really pleased with what you both had, and and I think sometimes we have a very easy out. Everything is so speedy in life now, everything's on an app and speedy chat, blah, 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 that I have a real. I think what's so nice, when there's a whole sort of wave of slow food. I mean, and we call it slow food because we've gone so fast, but yet back in the day, that's just the norm, wasn't it? The food was sort of, again, prepared. And, I remember being in Syria as well, like, a good morning would be spent doing some shelling or some cleaning of the vegetables before they got to be cooked, I mean, personally myself, I did make some nettle soup the other day, and it was, I had to get the nettle from out, which is my choice, and I loved it, but there was a lot of that preparation, picking them off one by one, and then putting it, and then sort of washing it. But then it was part of this sort of process, I wouldn't say I had the time for it. I've always created time, but then I decided to also just use the nourishment from life itself that was immediately accessible, and for a city girl, I think that's quite all right.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's such an important experience. I mean, you reminded me in that story is that, in a lot of cultures, but a lot of the sort of treasured moments are, and I think of holidays in New Zealand when I was young, and you would have an activity to do, and then that would frame the day, and then at the end of it, you'd create the meal together from it. So, I'd grow up going to the beach in summer, and we'd go and harvest mussels from the rocks. Oh my God, so that would be, you'd do a packed lunch. You'd do a little mission adventure down to a beach, and then you'd have to wade out or swim out to these rocks and pick mussels off them. And then when you got home, you had to shell them all, and you had to cook them up, and then you'd share them. And then sort of like that. So you've actually filled a day with something you're doing together as a family, and all the adventures around it. And there's sort of like I don't recall ever during those days of feeling bored and, oh, can I watch something? It's
true. And that also brings me back to, and that was family, but I recall a friend of mine, many years ago, her family had a beautiful kind of house, a rectory in Norfolk. And for some reason, I was always yours truly in the kitchen. That was the other thing. It was interesting, but somehow I guess I was seen to be able to be in the kitchen and just be whatever. But what was absolutely lovely about this holiday, I think there were about 11 to 15 friends who'd come down. We got some local crab, I think, from Cromer or whatever. But the point was, there was a big farmhouse table in the kitchen, right? And then typically, but that was all good because it didn't feel stereotypical or, oh, the girls are in the kitchen. It wasn't like that at all. it was the most humbling but most unified sort of time spent. We were
Yeah.
all designated, you know, we're all doing different things to make that food, you know, the result of it, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember it to this day. It was the most enriching, one of the long weekends we had, that it was all, food was prepared in this way, right?
Yeah.
You know, you know, we had a swimming pool, we had a games room, we had all this great stuff that we can do, but the food was part of that sharing, that fun time.
Yeah.
You know, and it was just wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And it's great, you know, and it made the whole round the table also really, you know, rich. You know, no, it's really good. I think there should be definitely more of that.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
I think this is
I've
why I
maybe
want to create these kind of like holidays, you know, cooking holidays and stuff like that, because I think that's really where it's at for me. You know, in
Yes.
fact, talking to you is making it really alive and animated in me, and kind of really making me recognize the spark of that for me as well. You know.
Yeah, and the sensation is really interesting because it can be quite challenging sometimes in those situations. You get sort of clash of different ideas and views, and you know, but when it goes well, when that's included, because often, you know, if you can include that, if you can include everyone having their own experience and then expressing themselves in their way, there's a massive freedom that comes from that, isn't there? You know,
Yeah.
and
it's a beautiful point you brought in, because it's true, there's a bit of like, you know, edge competition,
yeah,
you know, the slight victim that turns up as well, like, I don't get to do the good jobs
yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever. But I recall it even in the Concord programs, you know, in
yeah,
the retreat, you know, that was hard work. That was like
yeah,
very hard work. That was hours. I remember volunteering to do the kitchen. We were in the kitchen for 7 a.m. till God knows at 11 and stuff, and we were maybe even 2 hands down. And then we were churning all that food out, you know. And of course,
yeah,
in macrobiotically, there's so many different elements of
yeah,
food, you know, all the
yeah,
different, you know. But
yeah,
yeah, and then I remember, you know, sometimes, you know, I always felt like I was always one about washing up, or I'll be like, oh yeah, well, I'll wash up because I can do it the fastest.
yes. Or sometimes that was sometimes I really needed to just do 4 hours of washing up. That was the best thing I could possibly do.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
it was
get out of the way and just get your head in there, right?
yeah,
Isn't it interesting, that cycle? I mean, I even, you know, when I was in restaurants, for example, I couldn't even get a job actually initially in London. And the only place I could get a job was in a kitchen in London,
mm,
and as a
mm,
kitchen porter,
mm,
right? You know, and I did that in order to make ends meet, and I did doubles, and I worked really hard, you know, and I was like, well, £25 for 8 hours work. And
mm,
you know, and I was fresh out of college, university. So I had a lot of ambition, you know, and I certainly didn't expect to find myself behind, you know, at a sink, you know, but that was where it was at, and that was fine. But I think again, and I think I've heard once another chef say something along these lines. I think it's really good training, life training,
mm.
something very humbling, something very beautiful, something very powerful that comes out being in a kitchen.
Yeah,
You know, I
yeah,
think everyone should do mandatory kitchen training.
yeah. Well, I think the good thing is, and this might be useful to share, is that, you know, and there may be different environments in restaurants, and the perception of restaurants is very sort of masculine, very testosterone driven, very hierarchical. But of course, it's not always like that. And also, you know, I'm thinking specifically of Jean's kitchen, you know, teaching that we did, or training we did under Jean Tournay, that he was someone who's very much about presence and being, and is able to sort of access authority which is not charged, and is able to communicate in a way which is very
Yeah.
direct and very like, this is your function, this is your role, but it's none of it's personal, none of it's like, it's a surrender to these jobs need to be done, and you know, and there's a real sensitivity to it. So it really is a hearth. You know, you talk about that. He'll always talk about the heart, and he'll talk about the kitchen being at the heart of something sacred, like almost the Sufi tradition, is that in a church or in that sort of setting, the kitchen's at the heart of it. And when that's the environment which is created, it's almost like the crucible, isn't it? You know, all these sort of elements are flying around, all this emotions coming up, all,
Yeah.
you know, you're taken back into your family relationship and the relationship with the home. And that's why it gets so charged. And
Yes,
then you're
yes.
trying to
Like the
negotiate
constellations.
relationships. Yeah. And self-expression and your own, you know, your own limitations or your own frustrations they're all just, the
Reflected
kitchen will,
back, right? Or just
yeah,
active in the space.
activated. Yeah. And it's all welcome, you
Yeah.
know, and that's why it's such a place of transformation within that context. And that's what the magic was for me, is that there was it was a refuge. It doesn't mean it was going to be an easy time necessarily, but it was going to reflect back things in myself which might be useful to look at, and triggers with other people, or things I carry in there. Yeah.
Do you remember that time we were washing up, and I decided to voice that I wasn't happy about not getting any or we couldn't get the lunch or something. They wanted a subsidy of £5, and I decided to speak up because I was like, I'm volunteering for 8 hours and I can't believe we're not even going to get fed.
Yeah.
And then we had to pay for it.
Yeah.
But that, for some reason, you really gave me the evil eye, and I was like, oh no.
Did I?
Yeah. Yeah, at the sink. I remember it really well. I remember it really well. I know but isn't it brilliant that here we are? That it has a life of its own. In those spaces. I know it for some. It triggered me, for example, that because I was also in a space of having to really put my boundary up about my value.
Yes.
So that's been my training. For myself, that's been part of my personal development.
Yeah.
For me. So that's been a course of it. So I think for me in that space, it brought that up and I voiced it,
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is interesting how, and this is what I think powerful about, because that kitchen or that training, if you like, was quite special.
Yeah.
I've been in many kitchens,
yeah.
and both commercial and private, and obviously the commercial ones are completely, in terms of how it's, I won't say structured, but what can happen, the busyness and the amount of hands involved in cooking would be much more closer to, say, the Concord style. But yet the Concord style was completely unique, as you say, with John running it, sort of, facilitating it, and all the other sort of more senior assistants as well, yourself and was it Francis?
Francois.
Francois. Some of you really stood out. There was an absolutely beautiful Nile was another one, so many, the how food was, there was a sort of, it's as if it become a nourishing space that we respected. There was a lot of respect towards the produce, and that's the other thing. And I think and you're quite right. I think when people shop in supermarkets or go to supermarkets, there's a big disrespect for it, and it feels very disrespectful. Everything is cellophaned up. Everything, there's a culture within it that seems to be not the actual experience that's been passed down, but it's been manufactured. And I think there's a lot of losing touch with,
Yeah. And I think it starts from a disconnection. It may be disrespect, but it's also the disconnection from where things come from and from how it's produced. Yeah. Jean is faultless for that in terms of procuring things. He'll be interested in he's like the farmer. We should worship the farmer, because he's
because they're the one who toiled at the soil, right? That's one thing you also said here. I marked it in asterisks, actually. Gratitude for what the earth and seas provide, you wrote, and for those who toil to bring it to us over the weeks, months, and years. That really moved me, and I totally agree with you. I absolutely totally agree with you. And and I say a prayer every night. I light a little candle, a night lighter actually. Every night. Sometimes I just put my food down and I thought, I've got to light that. But it's this ritual to give thanks. I pray for the food I'm about to eat and stuff. But I think there's, I think that gratitude and that whether it's been we used to say prayers as a child around the table, but it felt very rote and very kind of empty somehow because it was more religious and it was just a recital.
Yeah.
Right? But there's something, I think, when you bring that awareness, as your words really expressed it so beautifully, And do you do that at home?
Well, not all the time, but it's something we do try and instill with our kids because, as you say, I grew up saying grace, but it didn't really mean much, but if you say grace connected to thank you for this meal in front of me in this plate, just a moment to reflect on the journey that's been taken for that food to get on your plate. And, and I think that's part of the disconnection. If it's just been, you bought it at Sainsbury's and you threw it in the microwave, there's no ability to have that connection because you don't know where it's been, you don't know where it's come from, you don't know how long it's been around, but the difference is if you, go to the market and go, I paid money to the farmer who's been growing those carrots for the last 3-4 months. And if you ever try and grow vegetables, you know how much of an investment that is and, a commitment that is. And, that's not even going to my God, the earth has created this magical thing, which is going to nourish me.
Yeah, no, it's very true. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is an opportunity there, and you know, I think there is. I think a disrespect comes from it, but it's at a broad level. It's this time is showing us our disconnection and our ability to, or our desire to create so much choice and so much distraction that we're not able to come into stillness and come into presence, or it becomes much more challenging to do that. And
Mm.
food's a great way of doing that. You know, if anything, it's more of a sort of this opportunity to create some stillness. And I think I'm just coming back to your kitchen. For me, you know, the experience of being in the kitchen is about becoming aware of our relationship with boundaries, our own boundaries, and with boundaries imposed on us, and our relationship with other people. And so that's that. I think that was the value for me, and it's an ongoing one. But just to be really conscious of my difficulty with boundaries, firstly, and then butting up against other people and how you navigate.
Mm.
Because there is a lovely structure within a functioning conscious kitchen of there's certain boundaries around, and it's coming from love, and it's coming from a sort of, you know, a certain consciousness. So it'll rub up against things which aren't quite there yet. So, you know, even the opportunity to go, no, that doesn't work for me.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I totally hear you. I remember once doing another transformational program, right?
Mm.
With an amazing man called Evan Root, and his thing is about still point, you know, coming from that stillness, you know.
Mm.
And we would have, I think we did have a couple of chefs who came in, or, you know, I wouldn't call them chefs. They were really great cooks, but chefs in their own right. I mean, you know, this term cook and chef also does me in a bit. I always think a chef is somebody who's been trained through the culinary, you know, the catering school and then become a chef. And I think they've earned that, right?
Yes.
I'm a cook. So sometimes when I'm referred to as a chef, I'm like, I'm not really that comfortable. And then there's something about cooking for me. But, you know, this is not what this talk is about. But I remember in this course, we were being designated roles, or you know, how we can participate to make their load easier in the kitchen, because there's only two of them and there's about 30 of us, so we had to take turns to be part of the kitchen, right, at some point. And the first thing that I think that came into my mind was, again, that I'll end up doing too much, right, which was my stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and as soon as it came out of my mouth, right, literally, you know, I was looking at Evan, I was just saying, well, that's not fair because I'm going to end up too much. I suddenly realized that it was me who was participating in the doing too much. Nobody was making me do too much.
No.
Right. So it's again, these spaces sometimes in the kitchen, you can really observe yourself.
Yeah.
You know, because in the doing too much, of course, what happens is I end up resenting it. I end up, you know, just sort of, you know, feeling that, oh, it's not fair. All this stuff, you know. So you get to be the observer of yourself. And I think the kitchen's with the consciousness that you can actually recognize, you know, where we are. And I think be really good. I mean, it would be wonderful, you know, if there were, I would do some after school, back in the day, you know, workshops for young kids. It would have been nice to see that also be facilitated as part of the space, you know, just, you know, to bring that kind of awareness into the space. Most of the time we will just have to make sure that the kids were all right with the knives, and, you know, state schools, unfortunately, you know, these knives get locked, you know, they did, you know, you had to get a special key to get them out for the cooking session and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, you know, and that's quite sad as well, really. You know, that, you know, there were these sort of amazing school clubs that were being set, you know, funded and all that. And yet there was so much, you know,
fear around it. Yeah.
You know, but when they worked really great. They were really great. But yeah. So, so we sort of diverted there, but is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, what did I want to add? I mean, lots of things came up, I guess. It just reminds me actually the value of teaching children, you know. And I remember I was very lucky to go to a school in New Zealand, which was, I think, was quite progressive anyway. But, you know, this would probably horrify some people, but one of my teachers, I vividly remember, I was probably 5 or 6, but she would read stories, and there was a story about the crabapple jelly or something, and we ended up making crabapple jelly in class. So we made like hot, sticky crabapple jam in class, no safety, nothing. But she would also take kids home and treat them to a roast chicken dinner. So I remember, you know, like one Sunday we'd go around to her house and she'd cook a roast chicken dinner for me and a couple of other boys. It's like, and she'd go through the whole class and take them to have a home
Yeah,
cooked
yeah, it's
meal.
true. It's true.
And
Yeah.
it's like, oh my God, you never do that these days. But
No, you couldn't. You'd have to even get these all this sort of, what's it called? You know, the release forms and you know, do you know what I mean? The whole, you know, sort of whatever security things.
yeah,
It's true. Yeah, because you're absolutely right. When I was 8 years old, it was the same. We had some teachers who just really had this capacity to extend themselves beyond the classroom.
mm,
You know, and they showed us some really great life skills outside of the school, and then took us to the home. And you know, it was creative, it was musical, and food
mm,
orientated, and
yeah,
yeah, you know, yeah, it
mm,
doesn't happen anymore. And I think that's very sad because there's more broken homes now as well, broken
mm,
structures, and you know, people working two jobs, as you say, and then you know, so sort of these kids just get TV dinner, and you know, and they're sitting on the
yeah,
lap and all
yeah,
that kind of stuff. You know,
yeah,
I personally think it's really important. I just think also with this, you know, this pandemic and this whole COVID thing, and you know, and it could be times of instability and crisis. I think food is very nourishing and very grounding, and it'd be really wonderful. And I do wonder that people have started bringing some of these elements back to the home because, after all, they have
mm,
more time, right? You
mm.
know, do you know what
Well,
I
I
mean?
think you say, you should come back to that, is the value of cooking as well. I think, you know, when we're talking about it, it sounds like, oh, it's very dramatic and that, but the value of actually engaging in cooking is it's a great way to come back to that stillness, isn't it? So you can bring however you are. And Jean would always say that, you know, just, you know, no matter where you are, if you're tired, emotional, you're angry, whatever, just cook, you know, just cut up an onion, grab an onion, cut it up, and you might sort of be in tears, and it's like, you can blame the onion. Um, but before too long, you'll be able to work through whatever's going on because you're physically engaged, you're moving the energy. There's something about, you know, we could talk about angry cooking, you know,
Yeah.
but
That came to my mind as well. Don't cook while you're angry because all the energy goes to the food. But there is still, you know, who knows, right? I mean, there's many ways of doing certain things, but I think it's, you knowing what it is. If I think, you know, but again, I totally agree with you. This whole body thing. I think it's, you know, it's as you say, it's holding. It's the action between the mind, the body, and an item or life in your
mm,
hands.
mm,
You know, be it a piece of flesh, fish, or something, or vegetable, or whatever. There's an engagement, bringing a concentration.
mm,
You
mm,
know, I think we're so busy in our minds as well. I mean, even, you know, that whole Buddhist thing, you know, chop wood and carry water, chop wood and carry water. You know, it's the same. You know, sometimes for me to come back to a point of stillness, I might put the tap on and just really experience the washing up. You know, literally, this, you know, just see, you know, the
yeah,
lathering sponge on the, you know, the crockery, whatever. And there's
yeah,
something about the purity of it all, you know, isn't there?
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
or the spirit of it all.
yeah. And I'm sort of, that's something you can really do together, because I'm sort of I'm sort of in awe at the moment. My son is just completely fascinated with cooking. So he's 18 months old, and he's got his own little kitchen at the moment. He's playing with stuff, but whenever I'm cooking, he wants me to carry him and see what's happening on the stovetop. You know, so no matter what I'm doing, if I'm toasting something or I'm sort of boiling something, but he will want to see it, and there's sort of like a real interest. And I can start, even now, I'm giving him a sort of a knife to sort of cut things with,
Yeah.
and the sooner the better. You know, it's this whole thing of just for a moment, forget about the risk, because the whole point is get used to dealing with fire and sharp things and water and stuff. You learn how to deal with those things, and the earlier you do it, the better it is. It's not avoiding stuff. It's a gift to actually know and develop a relationship with that.
I
And
agree. Mm.
I had a big lesson. I was actually walking in Sikkim in northern India, and I had this wonderful adventure there. In a way, I was sort of walking in the mountains, and then I came back down and I discovered a little mountain village. And it turned out that the guy there used to be the cook for the Dalai Lama. And him and his son had set up a little sort of village places where travelers could stay. So I ended up staying for a week. And I stayed with a son who, he had lots of kids running around, and he'd cook in an outdoor hut over a fire. And he'd make sort of like rice, coffee, and some amazing stuff, and yak meat and dals and rice. But I remember seeing his kids, honestly, they were like feral wild animals. But he had an 18-month-old son, and he picked up a knife, like a proper knife, and was started flashing it around. And he just turned his back. he just sort of ignored him. He didn't make it like a big song and dance about it.
Don't do that. And what are you doing?
Yeah.
And how dangerous it is. Yeah, yeah. That's right.
So it was like, wow, okay. So that's one way you can do it. You know, obviously he probably cut himself at some point but he wasn't scared of it. He wasn't like,
I think we undermine the intelligence of kids. And I think for some reason that also somehow got projected somewhere along the way and kind of denied the children their intelligence. And I think there are different children with different abilities as well, isn't it? But it's recognizing the ones that are willing, as you say, you already recognize your son having the spark for the interest and all that. And somehow you can really cultivate that as well.
Yeah.
No, that's wonderful. No, I totally agree with you. I mean, my experience of working with kids in the kitchen was very similar. Some of them really just were hungry for that experience, and they would shine. You give them a bit of a compliment for cutting that onion really well, or well done, or they do. So there's someone that's really surprised you, and they've got little diddy hands with these little big knives, and then but they just I don't know, they just seem to engage naturally to it or be part of something, and they only need to be praised and also just sort of really encouraged. And I found that sometimes even these little moments of the work that I got to do was so fulfilling, because unfortunately a lot of the funding had sort of run out and petered out, but you can really, children can really benefit from that kind of interaction with an adult who's got time as well. Sometimes most parents are, again, very impatient, very intolerant. They're stressed, they've got other things going on, and there's this, again, disengagement between the space between the child and the parent, when and can get shunned, and suddenly they're
And I do notice, I mean, I've been trying to, I've been homeschooling my 6-year-old during this time, and I realize I get into a sort of quite impatient thing in relation to the schoolwork. And then I'm really sitting in that thing of, I'm trying to force her to do stuff, and she's not interested. And I wonder how much of that's coming from me, but I've been trying to bring in cooking exercises, and naturally that's something we can really connect with. Like I taught her how to make pancakes the other day, and we've done it a couple of times. And initially she was quite scared of the spitting oil and stuff, but she's learning gradually how to flip them. And the sense of achievement about, wow, I made the mix now, and now I can flip them, now I can cook them. And she's making progress, and she can see it, and she's excited, and she's looking forward to the next time, That's probably one of the best things we've done this whole time.
I totally agree. And I think those life skills, and I think, again, school, is so structured, and, we've lost, again, I mean, if we took school like from back in the day when they were like in a church hall, where, got all mixed levels, and, to the kind of the gradings and all that kind of stuff. So there's this really hierarchical, whatever, but again, there's something about food cooking. There's so many skills in there. There's interaction. There's a sense of confidence being built. It's fair play across the boy or girl boy, right? It's there's no gender bias. Okay, that people really have to play. There's something about that, I think, and I think it's there's a result, an end result, that's pleasurable as well, right? To share and eat and stuff like that. And I think it's a really healing terrain. I remember it's come up twice, so I'll share it. I used to really clash with my mother badly. We'd always be in arguments and upsetting her, and I'll be upsetting whatever. But interestingly, I learned a lot of the cooking ability from her in the kitchen and stuff like that. So it got to a point that I felt a lot of my clashes with my mother, for example, dissipated because we would still clash in the kitchen sometimes, and we're like, oh.
Of course, yeah.
But then also, it also what healed it, our relationships, because also I would just suddenly, sometimes you just get out of your own way, right? Really, and then you just see it for what it is, and then there was this beautiful teamwork that would happen in the kitchen, and for some reason it was me and my mum would cook for the family. So, be it sort of for the Eid, there'd be feast days, and, family from, the extended family of, partners, in-laws and what have you. So there's a lot of food, and those kind of foods are also quite fiddly, lots to prepare, and, as well. So I always feel so blessed, especially now that my mum's older and we don't sort of get, that there are all these memories and times for me, years, where I got to share, myself, my mother, and our tradition and whatever in the kitchen, and it's also a really healing arena. I can never understand when people say they don't have time to make something. I just don't understand that. You know, I know life can take over, but I think it's something that can be really implemented and made the effort for.
Yeah.
Really, because it's nourishment. It's the ultimate nourishment, isn't it?
I think it's certainly become more challenging, and I think there is it's finding ways that you can engage, or times that you can engage with it. And I think that's why I loved I haven't really thought about it now, but it's why I love cooking on Saturdays, because it'll be part of a process. Firstly, we're not working, but we'll probably go to the market in the morning. I'll be inspired by something I see there. I'll get some fresh fish or seafood or something, and we'll get maybe there'll be something seasonal. That's the great thing. You're responding to what's seasonal, what's around. So it's going to support you anyway.
Absolutely.
And then you'll come back and, not normally I'll make a soup or something quite simple, so I'll make a stock, and then I'll make a vegetable soup or a miso soup or a pulse-based soup. And it's something enjoyable to do as an activity, and it creates the feeling of home. So that's, it's harder during the week. It can be harder during the week, but that's where, like you say, the disciplines work in your favor of batch cooking or cooking grains, and then having stuff available in the fridge you can just sort of add things to. But to actually create an experience of cooking which is enjoyable. And my wife often, she'll cook some muffins, or, with the kids especially, she'll say, oh, I'm going to do some muffins. And that's something that'll the kids will get involved in. For quick rewards, or ice blocks, or,
I think it's making choices, isn't it, that works for the family or works for the individual, and sharing that, I mean, which brings me to a question that I'd sketched out, I think last week when we'd hoped to do this, was is there any particular food that you really like that's kind of close to your heart, that either from your childhood or, over the years, but you might have you shared it with your family, but what would that be,
Yeah, well, I've had quite a sort of a journey with food, because I think I came from from a culture which is quite heavily meat and dairy, and then I realized that it didn't really work for me nutrition wise. So I've been cutting back certainly on red meat and white meat, and now I eat very little at all. So, but there is something about those one pot dishes that are very satisfying. Like I don't do it very often, but like a chicken stew, for example, where you just sort of braise it really slowly with beans and some white wine and tarragon or something, that it's just sort of potatoes, something which is very simple. I actually love the Mediterranean cooking I actually made a chorizo dish, again, for someone who doesn't eat much meat, chorizo and beautiful big butter beans.
Oh yeah, nice, very nice.
Tomato and a bit of smoked pimento, so it's just so rich and fragrant. It's probably not so much now because it's a bit more sort of lighter season. But I think ultimately I'm really drawn to seafood. I love cooking seafood. That's so that can be quite simple. It's just like pan fried fish and rice and greens. That will do me any time of the week.
I know, and you can even sometimes pop a right piece of fish in the oven with a bit of salt and pepper and olive oil as well. And you can just bake it with some. I remember once being with vined baby cherry tomatoes, and it was just so sublime. I was like, God, it's so easy. And it's true, fish doesn't really need that much fuss, fussing around. No, I totally agree. So if you were, so I've got something. So cooking and sharing is quite key, really. So I know that modern couples these days have a lot to do, right? Splitting the house chores as well as the raising the family, say. So if you were to sort of give a tidbit out in terms of how to cook and share, what would that be? Either that you practice, or maybe you would like to bring into your own personal space as a practice.
How to cook and share. Well, I mean, firstly, I think we could do a whole other session around relationship and relationship during this time. But essentially, my wife and I have taken on certain roles during this time. So I'm much more the homemaker, actually. So I'm sort of homeschooling our kids, and my wife's business is going really well. So she's tending to that mainly. But we still split the cooking, and I think that's it's quite fluid, I think. And I think it's finding a balance which works. Obviously, we're fortunate that we're both very good cooks, and we both enjoy cooking. So that's a big benefit, So I'm doing all the shopping, so I get all the food in.
Yeah.
And I generally keep keep things well stocked. So there's things available to cook. That's number one. It's very hard to cook when there's nothing around, you know. So there's a lot of basic staples. A lot of, you know, we have plenty of rice and grains and some pasta. The kids love pasta,
Yeah, kids
but
do.
also plenty of vegetable protein. So lots of, I think that's it. It's just having well-stocked resources,
Yes.
and fallbacks. You know, and we've even, I'll tell you what, we've started. Realize we've just done a thing on Sunday to make life easy. We're doing baked beans, oven chips, peas, and veggie sausages,
Yeah.
and that's become our Sunday staple. And weirdly, my wife talked about that being actually something she recalled from being young, that it was something she looked forward to as a family meal.
Yeah.
And that, weirdly, that's like, well, that's just a nothing meal, but actually it's very satisfying.
Yeah. Yeah.
It solves the problem. You know, have a few things that you can go to without having to think about it. You can fall back on. It just minimizes the stress.
I know. Yeah. I don't think this is the thing. Food shouldn't have to be stressful, should it really?
No.
You know, and I think this is where also it's become that way a bit for various reasons. But again, like, you know, I think if we become too rigid, yes, yeah, with, you know, the certain days of the week or whatever. I mean, I posted recently something about some turkey breast and stuff for Sunday roast, and then somebody posted something saying, "Oh, we just had lasagna because we're changing things around the lockdown." And I'm thinking, yeah, okay, well, fair enough. But I wasn't coming from that place. I just happen to be shit. You know, I don't do roast because I live on my own, so I don't often do roasts either, right? You know, but I do them, and I don't, you know. But again, for me, it's not about a case of a certain day, but certain days might call for a certain kind of food. And I think I think also what's important is to getting back to our core, getting back to our inner compass, and it is probably a bit harder when you're doing a family, I would say, but to tune in. And I think actually when you're really tuned in as a family as well, you're tuning in feeds the whole, right? Okay. And there's that magic, you know, where you're the alchemist, and you know, you're offering your people, you know, family food. So whatever you decide to tune in, but I think it's important to tune into what we want rather than again being so rigid about it, you know. I just think, you know, I'm just big on more flow, more trust, more fluidness, you know, with the energy that's available in the space, with what's available in the kitchen, with what's, you know, so creating something out of that all the time.
Yes. And I think that's why those two moments where we came together and realized we were both lacking in energy, I think that was quite fresh for us to go, what can we produce together? You know, I'm not up to much, but I could do this. And the other person can go, oh, well, I'm not up to much, but I can do that. And suddenly you can feed off each other. And that's because I think that's the hard times when you're feeling depleted and you have no inspiration. But you feel it's all down to me. I've got to make the decision. But if you reach out and you say, look, I'm feeling a bit sort of uninspired, but you know, can we do something together? You know, those are the difficult times. And that's when it's good to have some fallback dishes. I mean, often I know that times like that, it's quite good to just do a very simple miso soup.
Yes.
And we're lucky that, you know, we've introduced that to the kids. They love it. Miso noodles. It's a good fallback, and it's probably indicative that we need something a bit nourishing and a bit strengthening.
Yeah, and very grounding as well.
Very grounding. And that will always be, you know, and there's a couple of other dishes like that where it's like, oh, that's probably a good go-to right now. It doesn't take much to do, you know, but it will actually rejuvenate us a little bit.
And it's interesting because that's one thing macrobiotic really did teach me, although I hadn't sort of really gone full on with, you know, and I'm conscious of the time, so we will be wrapping up.
Oh, yes.
You know, no, it's all right, it's fine, but again, just talking about energy, you know, different food, you know, it's like miso is very grounding, you know, it's fermented, it's good for the gut and all this kind of stuff, you know. But again, which poses the question for me about those, you know, who do all the kind of raw foods and all that, you know, which has become a big trend. And I wonder sometimes people really take trends on rather than really paying attention to the bodies, which always I question. And I recall once moving into a flat, and at the time I didn't have any of my cooking utilities, whatever, installed. It just wasn't, you know. And had no fridge even. So I had to then sort of use a cool box and ad hoc a bit of salad in the cool box. And luckily it was winter, I think, so I kind of managed. But in any case, and what was really interesting and fascinating for me to witness and notice straight away, about 2-3 weeks into this sort of forced way of eating, which was storing things in the outside in the cool box and not having anything to really cook with and whatever. So eating hummus, dips, that kind of stuff, just to kind of sustain myself. And it's interesting, so I'm not a huge bread person. but I probably would have eaten bread. But the point was, I remember getting somebody giving me a slow cooking pot, slow cook, and I made some, chickpea something or whatever, and I felt after eating a meal, after 3 weeks not having anything substantial or grounding or whatever, having something like that, I felt like a flower that had been watered. Suddenly it was like, oh, I just felt like it was this way as well. It came up, there was a sense of aliveness. It's really weird, as if my body had suddenly woken up to the everything, and I think it's really interesting that that food, that if people brought a bit more awareness into the food that they're eating or how they feel, most people start feeling things when they, when their the body's a bit poisonous, or, oh, I'm really bloated, I've eaten something like, but there is something, isn't it? And that's an inquiry in itself. What have I eaten, that's made me this, and of course we've eaten so many things. So, but you have to peel off the layers, don't you? I mean, I suffered from a bit of bowel, not bowel, sorry. It could have been IBS and stuff, but, constantly it mirrored something that was not really working in my life and stuff. And there was a lot of discomfort after eating, but, I think that's a whole nother topic really. But I think it's very important that we tune into the foods. I mean, food is such a huge topic, really. Cooking.
Oh, massive. And I think that's a key thing. Yeah, that's a key thing around when we are vulnerable. What happens, and it's sort of it's an intervention, isn't it? Because we know when we're feeling a bit low, often we go down the route of comfort food, and there's nothing wrong with that per se, but that might actually consolidate the way we're feeling rather than transform it, And so it's just, as you say, it's developing an awareness of and certain responsibility around the choices we make.
And there's that word that you just mentioned, which popped into mind. It's the choices that you make. I think sometimes comfort food serves, right? But again, what choice are we making around the comfort food? Comfort food could be some really nourishing food that my mum used to cook for me when I was a kid.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's my, I really want to eat that, the chicken and yogurt dish with, this.
Oh yeah.
Just lovely, honestly, it's just the best.
Yeah.
It's really lovely. I'll
beautiful.
make it for you sometime. It's beautiful.
Oh, please.
Or now and again, good macaroni cheese might do the trick.
Jack of potatoes, nothing.
So there is the comfort food, but I think maybe you're related to the comfort food, maybe more the what's that called? Maybe more kind of the junk food. I don't know if that's comfort.
Yeah.
There is the TV dinner type. It's really rare that personally I would do that, but then there's, I don't know, I mean, I've bought a ready-made meals a few times, occasionally I'd see something that was reduced, from like £3.50 to 99p, and it'd be like some made ravioli in tomato, and I think, oh, well, I don't make ravioli really. I haven't quite extended my time to that, yet. Yeah. But at the same time, there is certain things, but I think it's really important that we make choices that help to be truthful. I think you have to get back to a place where you know what your body feels and what it needs. I think when you're very disconnected from that something has to happen. You have to make a sort of a really concentrated effort, don't you, to kind of get back to kind of the neutral.
Yes.
But because there are different levels. But I don't think the people who be really eating really bad food would be listening to this. Because because I really believe in the certain types of people that would be tuned into certain things to be able to listen to it. It's, I don't know, who knows? It's kind of like
they might eat their dinner in front of it. We'll see. I don't know.
So but yeah, no, that's it's just really interesting that kind of, I've always made time for food. I've sometimes not had time for food, but I would just also make food that I know I can, as I said, it's thinking ahead as well. I think that's what the kitchen teaches you as well, thinking ahead.
Yes.
Always one step ahead.
Yeah, being prepared.
Yeah, being prepared, right? So
being a little bit organized and being prepared, and supporting yourself when you're not at the peak of your powers. I think that's really, you start to acquire little tools around that, certain awareness. Yeah. Great.
Yeah. Excellent. So, and then I just want one thing, maybe for another conversation another time, but just to feed it in, you did this what's called the man-to-man project. Okay.
I did.
Okay.
Yes. Well, I am. It's sort of ongoing. It might be helpful to. I mean, the bulk of my work, or the work I do outside of food, I guess, is in transformation. I've been doing a lot of men's work, So that means actually supporting and co-facilitating men's weekend workshops. And on the back of that, I started this man-to-man project because I was very intrigued around men's relationship with other men, and how that seemed to be very different when you would go into a workshop experience to what what they'd talk about during those workshops, their experience of what it was to be like as a man in everyday life. And it was sort of to test a bit of a theory around that, this idea that men tend to be quite competitive or operate in a very competitive environment and have certain challenges about being in groups of men, which actually add to the feeling that they can't really be fully expressed or fully authentic, or it's very difficult to find places to really sort of reveal what's going on for them. And weirdly, when you're in a situation in a workshop which is set up in a context of real vulnerability and truth, all that just disappears very, very quickly. Suddenly there's a very natural sort of brotherly connection and a almost unconditional support which emerges, certainly after going through certain experiences and certain processes together. And almost to a fault, everyone would say, well, I've shared more of myself more authentically than I ever have in my life to anyone in my family and any of my close male friends, and that's with complete strangers over 2 days. And I'm just really intrigued by that, and it's why I'm exploring it. I'm asking men to just reflect on their relationship with other men. How does it occur? How authentic do they feel that they are with them, and how authentic do they feel other men are with them? And it's led to some really interesting conversations and reinforced some theories I have, but also it's just helping me sort of get an understanding of what men are grappling with, and in order to support them in the coaching that I'm doing. And obviously it's been an interest myself because I've felt some of these things, that actually one of the biggest challenges for me is to step out of competition or comparison with other men, which inhibits my ability to connect and to really get support from other people. So, and there's a lot of talk about it. There's a lot of, obviously it's a big issue. You could go from the problems for men in terms of, suicide, mental illness, depression, blah, 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 right through into the appalling levels of domestic violence and, violence of men, which can be linked straight back to this thing of how much provision is there for men to actually be able to express what's going on for them, and how safe do they feel. And I think it's a really it's sort of almost, this is a whole other discussion, I think, but I think that's an important one to make that link, is the stuff that men come up against in themselves, which is part of the experience of becoming a man and growing into manhood. A real absence of that space or permission to be vulnerable and to have those sort of conversations.
I mean, I do understand and believe that there's more and more of these male groups now being formed. There's, I think there's a need for it, and and I think it's wonderful that you are part of this. I won't say new movement, but certainly what's required. I think it has, that you hold the space and compassion and learning and all that kind of stuff, really. And I just wondered, maybe, I just had this sort of crazy thought that maybe it'd be really quite nice that you would facilitate a good weekend, and have them also be part of a kitchen, because also that's all part of sharing. And because, I was kind of bringing into this conversation partly because I think there's something about getting them, some of them, maybe some are, more already adept that way, but how the food is nourishing, how they'll nourish themselves and how they nourish each other in this space, as you've learned and we've learned, how it could happen in a space like that, because I think that really brings it back to the basics as well, and sometimes away from the conversation, but then again a mixture of that kind of grouping around, sitting around the circle and expressing it, as well as working in a team or whatever, as a solidarity of brotherhood, and then sharing their stories, because all of them will have a story about their childhood, about food, the moms, the grandmothers, and and all that kind of stuff as well. So it's wonderful. No, it's really good. But I think that'd be a really great thing to I don't know, maybe bring up, so yeah,
well, I have done some of those. I mean, I've been involved in men's work for some time, and I'm currently running a men's circle, but I used to be part of a more committed men's group where I did hold cooking classes with them, with a group of men. So, and I've done that in different sort of spheres as well, sort of more outdoor cooking and camping and stuff. So, but it's lurking there. You're right. It's sort of lurking there. As like, how can I do this? Because I'm looking at the moment to develop programs of that nature, as a sort of process. So, you know, I'm sort of working on that right now, is to develop a program around self-realization.
Yes.
I haven't at the moment incorporated cooking as part of that, but I think it's almost like like you say, it's a standalone thing, which would be a really great experience. Just to,
and you know, and it just seems, well, from here, it seems like quite a natural thing, you know.
Oh yeah.
It weaves in. It's like a tapestry, isn't it? It weaves in about your memory, about your, you know, the outdoors, the cooking, you know, your heritage, and within all the cultures, but then also that whole transformational aspect in the food, and it's also allowing men to be, because there's also this sort of stigma, oh, well, I don't cook, you know. Then my last partner was, you know, he just refused to cook. He just didn't want to cook, didn't care, you know. And then there was a little coaxing that happened, and he did sort of take pride in doing the, you know, wanting to get into the kitchen, but then he couldn't be bothered to do the shopping, you know. So there's, you know, a few things, you know, but somehow it's a step-by-step process. But again, I think there's something about, I think for starters, it's quite sexy when a man that does, you know, likes to cook. You know, it's always nice to share the load, but I think also it's almost dispelling anything that we might have around it. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
And it's a good, like I said, it's a good space for that. It's not, it doesn't have to be, gender specific. I mean, in fact, it's not even gender. You know, the things, because as we know, even in chefs and kitchens are mainly male, but there's a different energy, isn't it? I think you bring something really wonderful to it. Yeah, for sure. Not already, of course, but you know.
Well, speaking of gratitude, I'm very grateful to my mum that it was sort of introduced to me in a way that it wasn't an unusual thing. It was just something you're both going to do it, you know, and there's no question about it. And it was such a gift to be, because that's quite unusual amongst my friends. I went to other friends' places, and you know, some of them had no introduction to that. So I'm very grateful, you know. And as you say, it's not necessarily becoming a chef, but to be able to home cook and look after yourself is vital for everybody. You know, just having that, it's an empowering thing. It's sort of like, otherwise it can become a source of division within a relationship. And I know that it's always it's painful for me when that sort of situation arises, and there's like, it's an expectation that the woman will cook, and it just feeds resentment in a relationship, doesn't it?
And it does, and it did, because I recall having to put myself away often, you know, from my work, or there'll be a certain thing, and I'm kind of like, you know, but then there'll be some point where I'd have to go and cook, you know, whereas, you know, it'd have been great that if, you know, he had the ability to say, listen, don't worry about it. I'll just get on with it.
Yeah, I'll do it tonight. Don't worry.
You know, you know, and there really wasn't that. So there's a point of that. So, you know, and I think that, you know, there are different challenges and stuff, you know. It was nice to be taken out for dinner, and I didn't mind that. So that kind of compensated for, you know, all of it.
Yeah. Okay.
But it is, you know, and I think, you know, but I'm also quite naturally inclined to want to cook. I mean, you know, it takes a lot more effort for me to get out of the way, if you know what I mean. But I'm quite, you know, I mean, he did make a really good cheesecake once. I was really impressed. And in fact, I forgot to put the sugar in, and it still tastes stunning, which showed that you didn't need half the sugar in it. So, but, you know, no, I really want to thank you. Actually, speaking of gratitude earlier, you know, and I think I'm really kind of humbled that, you know, that I've been raised in a family of my mum with food, and that really featured. But also, it's really thank you for you coming here today, you know, being part of this space. And I think, you know, I think we covered quite a lot, and we've sort of gone around having different conversations. And I just wondered if there's any little final word or anything you want to sort of share that you're doing, or you want, you know, to put out there.
Well, I really enjoyed the conversation. I really thank you for inviting me to have this chat with you. And it feels like we've only just started. Maybe I don't know. We might have some more, but yeah. And I'm interested to people who are looking for, you know, I'm looking to support people, and not just men, but I certainly am. A lot of my work is in support of men looking to find a place to stand in the world, and that might be looking at their, you know, what they're working towards in their own life, especially now. It's like, what's important to you? What do you want to do? What thing do you want to contribute? But also, how can you resource yourself? You know, so that's sort of my area of interest, that I can share a lot.
And do you find that you veer towards men yourself, or do you have a mix? Did you have a mix of sort of, you know, clients, you know, or, you know, sort of in terms of gender? I found that personally, I was much happier with women for some reason. I just found that I was able to hold the space, and somehow, maybe because I had an immediate affinity with them, you know, an inner understanding.
Yeah, it's funny because I've worked with both, and I think more because I've been involved with men's work recently, I'm sort of a little bit drawn to support men particularly. I'm very in tune with some of the issues they're facing, obviously. But weirdly, I seem to get more response from women, like talking about some of the things I talk about. So I'm actually sitting quite curious about that. Am I because I think it's not a man or woman thing at all. I'm just at the moment just in sitting in what I'm really, it's coming back to the purpose. I'm really connected to the sort of finding a space, a sense of belonging, which means finding a place to stand in the world and having a sense of purpose and stillness, you know, but also looking to create something of value. And I guess the reason why I'm drawn to men is I think that's key for men, and it's a particular issue right now, is that a lot of the sense of identity for men and the way we work and live is all up in the air. And so we're very unsettled. We're very, women are much more better placed. They've been sort of dealing with this for, you know, the last few decades of, you know, taking all this by the scruff of the neck, and they're more adept at navigating through the way that they communicate and the way they get support from each other.
Yes, I think communication is definitely a difference, isn't it? And again, like, you know, you would find that, I found that, I mean, we all know that men and women communicate, and there was a whole book of Mars and Venus and whatever it was, you know, but literally in my coaching space, for example, you know, I would really find a huge difference between expression and communication between men and women, and how they were able to access their feelings maybe, or, you know, process that and what have you. But I wondered this thing about belonging, which also, I forget her name now, but there's a really good book called Belonging. God, it will come back to me. But
it's not Brené Brown, is it?
Oh God, no,
sure. No. Okay.
I mean, maybe she has written now a book called Belonging, but I know Tokopana. She could be from New Zealand, you know. Tokopana. Oh, it's my God, it's such an incredible book. It's so beautifully written, and unfortunately, I don't have it here in my library to bring out and show it to you as well, because it's in my bookcase in Portugal in a garage, because I took it with me to read. I only took 2-3 handful of books to read. And I read that, and I was so moved, I just had to take it with me to continue just dipping in and out of it. But I was recently doing some other work around actually the heart, to be honest. We talk about heart and the hearth. But, you know, the sense of belonging comes from the heart, right, really. So I think there's such a huge disconnect with all of us. We've been so cerebral that there's a sense of, you know, that by connecting to the heart more and more and more, and making that part of the practice, that we would feel we belong. And there's a sense of natural extension of our belonging with each other, to ourselves, actually, first and foremost.
Yes.
Right. And then that could be extended out, you know. I think that's very important, you know, because I think from there, everything will stem, if you like, you know, the choices that we make that are actually really heartfelt, or the connections that we make that are heartwarming, or you know, and we become a radar where things that really don't have any meaning to us will just naturally fall out, or because there is that, isn't there? We can belong, we can feel that we do belong, but then be somewhere and have that total sense of loss, right? I remember once going through a phase like that in my life. I just was surrounded by all these people and didn't feel like I belonged. It was awful. It was such a strange feeling, and it's this massive thing that follows you around. You know, it followed me around anyway, and I couldn't make it out. And it's not so much a struggle over the years so much, because I'm still navigating my life, interestingly. I still question a lot, you know, what am I meant to do? I ask the divine to be led, you know, and I sort of free floating more, or feel like I'm just trusting an inner compass rather than trying to make sense of what I have to do. But notice what animates me, or what really moves me, or, you know, but I've been working personally on my heart more, you know, so I can really feel that and start moving towards that. People have meaning, not meaning to me, like of some kind of using, but more of like a connection, really, where there's a language of a feeling, you know?
Yes, very much so. Yeah,
so
I think
that's something that, you know, and I think that the hard work, you know, women or men, we really need to get back to that, I think, as well.
And it's very much connected to the body. I sort of connect with, it makes perfect sense, because it's almost like coming into the center. So, you know, often we operate, even like in our gearing, we're very sort of upper oriented, but which means we're sort of in a sort of state of preparedness or anxiety or survival state. So the whole thing about bringing our energy down into our heart, firstly, we're connecting more to ourselves, but we're also coming from a certain place, as you say. There's not like a grasping or a
that's right. I know you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's true, and we just can't help it. We've got so much to think about. So we're up here all the time. And then you get your footwork and your grounding and stuff. But it's this, isn't it? It's the core, the heart, and then the power as well, the central, sort of. I mean, my work's very much around the chakras, it's a tools or something I've learned years ago, and it really did transform me. And then I kind of abandoned it because while I recognized the enormity of how much it transformed me, I took it almost for granted. It's a bit like eating well for ages, and you kind of go back, kind of just sort of get past. I don't know, you just kind of get wayward somehow. I don't know. But anyway, that happened to me. And then I with so many changes and crisis, and this is one area of crisis that we're all going through collectively. But I had my own personal, with my relationship breaking down, and and I needed to get back to somehow my inner self again. I'd lost myself completely within the relationship and everything else that, so I found that by accessing that, and I found that getting back into my core is working for me more than ever, even despite the fact that I might not have, by far any of the solutions yet. But I think in terms of, sense of, I don't know, some kind of change does definitely happen, some kind of transformation really happens. But But no, it'd be really great for us maybe to do some work together, or, to have this conversation again, on table talk or anything.
Oh, fantastic.
And I'm really pleased, so pleased. And like I said to you before in the previous chat that we had, just when we're getting to know each other again, that, if someone had said to me, who would be your first guest, right? It would never even occur to me, but it was that whole immediate spark and that spontaneity and listening to your voice, which I think is very profound, very and just really heartfelt and very honest. I really like that, and it really spoke to me. There's a lot of stuff that get posted out there, and I'm like, but Kevin, your stuff and how you voice things and how you write, I really recommend that you go to Kevin's website as well. It's kevinhelas.com, right?
It is, yeah. Or on my Instagram as well. I sort of post quite a lot on there, so just under my name or through Life Navigation. But
what I'll do is when I will edit this in the sense I'll just put a little caption, so it'll be there. But no, your writing is quite powerful. And
thank you, Rafa. Well, it's really
I'm a big fan.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to reconnect and over our connection originally as well.
That'd be great.
It's quite special about that time.
Yeah. And you really reminded me, this conversation is about the sacredness of the space, actually, of cooking, and doing that in a group as well. So thanks for bringing that back to me, to remind me of the magic that happens in that as well. Really. So we'll do some work again. All right.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. All right.
We'll speak soon again. And I do actually, I'm going to get in touch with you about something else, but yeah.
Okay. Well, nice speaking to you, Rafa. Take care.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So I would just like to finish this little segue of the table talk with Kevin Helas, who joined me today. I hope you enjoyed the talk and our ramblings on family, cooking, and what we think about food and kind of the culture of food. And this could be the first of many other series that we might do together. So just watch this space. And I just want to sort of mention that if you want to get hold of Kevin, you will be able to get him through Life Navigation at www.kevinhelas.com, and you'll probably see the link below of this segment. And also you can also check out his Whole Food Kitchen. He's done a lot of around food and has called, and this is something he's been running for years, called Whole Food Kitchen, and it's www.wholefoodkitchen, all lowercase, all one word, .co.uk, and again you find that there. And on Instagram you can see Instagram at Kevin Helas, KevinHelas, and also about his Man to Man project, which I'll put a link below in the description box. And you can find him also on LinkedIn. All these social media hotspots that you will sort of no doubt sort of tend to find or source people out on. So once again, thanks very much. This is Rafa Saba at Rafa Saba, really, life guide, life coach, and life transformer. I also have a vlog YouTube channel, as you know, called libertylane.tv. And I do Ask Rafa and upload chakra meditations for healing, particularly around relationships. So a lot of my problems that I answer for people are based around relationships. I also pull the tarot and some oracle cards and give people readings around that. So do have a look. There's plenty on my channel, and it's growing week by week. And I'd love to have your feedback on this. And please do comment below and let me know if there's something that you would particularly like us to discuss. Any topical issues around life, relationships, and core, and particularly food as well, and cooking. Any issues, anything you'd like us to discuss, we'll be very open to hearing your response and your feedback. Thanks again for watching. Thanks again for listening. And I hope to catch you soon. Bye for now. Bye.